Hot stove conversations about baseball, history, football, and current events that may leave you saying there's more to consider. Now, here's your host, Jack Moore.
Welcome to More to Consider. We're back to baseball. We do some politics, we do some baseball, we do all types of sports. I have done a couple of shows. Actually, I've done 2 or 3 shows on a gentleman that I met back in the winter when I was at the Virginia Coaches Association convention. They had a dinner and a gentleman received award that night, and his son accepted it for him. And he was William Forrester was a young man growing up in Richmond, Virginia, that at that time was not allowed to play Little League Baseball in the all-white Little League Baseball of Richmond. So his father, a medical doctor, a Howard University graduate, started a new league. And that league is continuing on to this day. And I went over that night and I said, hey, brother, if there's anything I can ever do to help you. Sure. So we've become good friends. So he asked me to come out to a Richmond, Virginia public school system where they are attempting, and it's great program, attempting to introduce baseball to young kids in these inner city schools. So we're in a part of Richmond. It's an inner city school and the school's behind it. And while I'm there, I meet this wonderful guy. I know we're going to be friends for life. I meet him. I'm like, I got to talk to this guy, Carl Smith. Carl, welcome to the show. First of all, Carl, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Coach.
And you are a Richmond native.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. And we were doing the little, I'm an old radio guy, so like talking off the air. And I'm just going to say straight up, I asked Carl, I said, tell me a little bit about your love of baseball. And as a young man, you got to work at the Diamond when the Richmond Braves were the AAA affiliate for the Atlanta Braves.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. One of the best jobs of my life right there.
And you were mentioning you got to work the visitor side, so you get to meet all these players coming in from the other teams.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, Mr. Washington, I have to always give a shout out to Ira Washington, my old gym teacher and coach at Henderson Middle School. He knew how much of a baseball fan I was. And he was like, man, ask your mom, could you come work for me? He worked the visiting room clubhouse. He was like the clubhouse manager, made sure, their uniforms were washed, and he fed them after every game. And I got a chance to work in that locker room. And man, I met so many great players throughout the years who eventually went on to be a big deal.
That's right.
Yeah, like I was telling you, I got a chance to meet so many of the guys on that 86 Mets team that won the World Series. In 1983, Kevin Mitchell, he was still there, Lenny Dykstra, Billy Bean. It was so many guys that I can just kind of run off.
Well, and for folks that are listening, when Carl says Billy Bean, many of you have seen Moneyball. You maybe read the book. The Billy Bean that he's talking about was a first-round pick in 1980. The story behind that is Darryl Strawberry was 1 overall. Billy Bean was 23rd overall. The Mets had 2 first-round picks. And they kind of accelerated Bean because they thought, he was going to go to Stanford to play football, smart kid. And it kind of destroyed him. And then Strawberry did pretty well. Strawberry had his bumps in the road as well. But I'll tell you this. Strawberry is one of the greatest physical specimens playing baseball I've ever seen. I saw him live, and was Strawberry ever coming through Richmond?
Yeah, he did come through. Yeah.
6'6", big dude.
I mean, those guys were like amazing. When you get a chance to just be in a locker room with them, you just kind of see their physical stature. Even though a player like Lenny Dykstra was short,
but he's put together.
He had huge forearms, and he was just built. And I was like, yeah, I know if I want to be like a professional athlete, I have to, work out. I have to, they look different on TV. When you get a chance to see them in person, it's different.
And was Dwight Gooden around at all during that time?
I don't remember seeing.
He was already up, I think, to
yeah,
the big,
I think he was up. But I mean, anybody that was on that, 86 Mets team, it was, they came through there for a stint, and I got a chance to see him early in the season. Funny story about Billy Bean. He was the first person to hit a home run in the new stadium.
Really?
Parker Field changed.
Became the Diamond, 84. Yeah, that's right.
And he was the first person to hit a home run in the new stadium.
Wow.
So I have that bat. My son has it in his room.
Yeah.
But I have the bat that he hit that home run with. Yeah.
What do you remember about him as a player? Because he seemed like he was so keyed up in the way they depict him in the film.
Yeah, man, he was just a stoic, like
Mm-hmm.
about his
Right.
business,
Yep.
tall guy,
Yep.
and he had one of those demeanors where, you didn't know whether you could approach him and all
Right.
of that kind of
Right.
stuff. But, like I said, he was the first one to hit the home run in the stadium. And I was like, man, can I get that bat? And he was like, after the homestand, he said the bat is hot right now.
Sure.
So
Got to keep
he
using it.
said
Yeah.
after the homestand, I'll give it to you. And he was a super approachable guy.
That was really nice. That was
Yeah,
big. Yeah. That was really nice
yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, yeah. He didn't know the meaning, what it meant to me, but he was like, here, and I was like, man, it took a lot in me to ask for.
Sure.
But, when I did, he was.
Because you were 12, right?
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
12
years old.
at the time. Yeah, yeah. So, but I met so many great guys come through there. With Toronto at the time, Syracuse Chiefs.
That's right.
Was Toronto's farm team, and Kelly Gruber.
Yeah. You remember Tony Fernandez? Did you see Tony Fernandez? He could play. I saw him. See, I used to go to a lot of games at the same time frame. One of my high school teachers had season tickets. And I remember the first night I saw Tony Fernandez at shortstop. I saw Danny Ainge. Now, that would have been when I'm talking, it was still Parker Field. So for those that are listening, and my man here is a Richmond guy, and I grew up 40 miles from Richmond, we know this. Parker Field was there forever. And it was a minor league city forever. So my good friend Tom House, I just recently did a show with, I think he spent part of 6 summers in Richmond.
Oh, wow.
And I remember saying something to him because he broke into the majors. He's the gentleman that caught Hank Aaron's 715th home run in the bullpen for Atlanta.
Wow.
So he's up with Atlanta in 71. So anyway, I was talking to him. I said, Tom, I must have seen you as a kid in Richmond. And he goes, well, I was kind of called the mayor of Richmond because I was there so long. But it was an old wooden bleachers field.
The wood, oh my God. It was a rickety stadium.
Yes, kind of scary. If you were up high enough, you could see the ground 40, 50 feet below and the pavement. Sure. So then they come in and they build the Diamond, and it opens in 84. VCU, Virginia Commonwealth, been playing there for years. What was strange about it, the way they built it, they put about 3,000 seats of the 11,000 seats down along the bottom, almost ground level. And then they put 8,000 up top in nosebleed. So when I moved to Norfolk in 93, the big buzz was it was the top minor league facility in the world at the time was the new Harbor Park. So they put like 8 down and 3 up. So most of the seats and they went all the way down the lines. They put a picnic area behind the left field wall. I love Richmond, but Norfolk really did it right with that new stadium. And the Diamond was already kind of behind the curve early, and then they got into a fight with Atlanta. When it went from the Boston Braves to the Milwaukee Braves to the Atlanta Braves was 66. So when Milwaukee moved to Atlanta, Richmond became the new AAA city.
Okay.
Because before that, it was the Yankees. I mean, a lot of guys, Tom Trash, all these guys that were famous during that, Bobby Mercer. That was a big city. I mean, that was a big thing in the 60s because the New York Yankees were in town in Richmond.
Okay.
They were the Richmond Virginians. Yes, they were the Richmond Virginians. They called them the V's, right? So then Atlanta comes in. So growing up, you know this, man, a lot of people were Atlanta Braves fans because we had that connection to Atlanta.
Yeah.
And then boom, they leave Richmond the Atlanta eventually goes to Gwinnett, that's right down the road from Atlanta. And stadium was left open 2-3 years or so. Yeah. And then
it wasn't long.
And then the San Francisco Giants come in Eastern League and they take the franchise, I think, from Portland, Maine, and they come to Richmond. And somebody might say, well, why are the San Francisco Giants all the way here? If you look at the map, there's only 3 AA leagues: the Eastern League, Northeast, the Southern League, and the Texas League. And most of the West Coast teams are trying to get into the Texas League to be at least somewhat closer to the West Coast. San Francisco came here. So we've had the San Francisco Giants now for over a decade in the Diamond. But now the Diamond, of course, is being replaced.
Yeah.
So
that's exciting. That's exciting.
It is. I'm going to be excited to see what that stadium looks like, but it's still there on Boulevard, still that same part of town. The Arthur Ashe Center is not far away. Arthur Ashe, of course, the tennis player, famously was also from Richmond, Virginia. So we have a lot of great athletes, a lot of great history in Virginia. All right. So you're a football guy.
Yes.
Played some basketball, had a love for baseball. And to get into how we met again the other day, I thought it was fabulous. We were getting kids anywhere between what, 4th, 5th grade?
Yeah, I think the groups we had were 4th and 5th grade.
And Carl will back me on this. These kids were beautiful. Man, they were just some really nice kids. Really.
High energy, yeah.
And they all came by, hey, coach, thank you so much for being here for us. Can't wait. I mean, they were really like, please come back. And, I had a blast. I had a blast meeting you. But a lot of these kids, you could tell, and it might be anywhere in America, really didn't know anything about baseball, but they seemed excited to find out.
Yeah. Yep.
So you're on the ground with this. Where do you see baseball, like in a town like Richmond, Virginia? Where do you see this type of outreach? Is it working? Are we getting anywhere with getting kids?
So it's relatively new. This type of outreach that happened through MJBL, it's really relatively new. I really think it can help.
Yeah.
Just the exposure, because the surrounding counties, if you take Hanover County, that's a big baseball county. Chesterfield, that's a big baseball county. Henrico, big baseball county, especially Western Henrico. Eastern Henrico, we have some really good baseball players individually, but the programs, Holland Springs is doing a decent job over there. Verona was trying to do something, but kids aren't getting like recognized unless you're like an elite player.
Yes.
And we have one coming through Holland Springs right now. But this type of outreach, I think, will give kids the exposure to the game, introduce the game. I thought we made it really fun, where the kids wanted more. And so, it's going to take outreach programs, putting it in Richmond public schools and starting them really, really early. I think 9 and 10 is sort of getting late in age, just because you get to the point where kids are starting to pitch. Like if you get a kid that plays T-ball, then they get a chance to go through coach pitch or machine pitch. They overcome that fear of the baseball early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's hard to put a kid in a box at 9 or 10 years old.
No, you're right.
With another kid pitching and ask them to have a good at bat. Like it's pretty tough.
Well, you've touched on something that is so simple and right there, but the way you just put it, we all go through that. And I just thought about that, the way you said that. When I was growing up, it was a neighborhood sandlot thing, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids out there. And we're all scared of the ball. I mean, I don't care what any guy or gal says. There's a little bit of fear and you kind of overcome it. But you're right. If you took an 11-year-old, say for that 11, 12-year-old kid, and he's that far down, he may be the greatest athlete on earth, but if you, hey, jump in the box and somebody's, that'd be like, I'm not used to this. I don't know that I want to be involved with this. That's true. There's a part of playing baseball and ever getting to any level in the game, you got to overcome certain things in childhood. That's really true. I'd never really thought about that. Now, another point of baseball that really, when I was coming up, you and I are about a decade apart, but when you're growing up, the place where a lot of kids just drop off is 13 because the fields change.
Expand.
And that's huge, man. So for the people listening, many of you listening to this the people that are listening will probably have this historically in their life, or they'll have this memory. You get out there and you're playing the little league thing. It's 60-foot bases. When it goes to pitching, it's 46, usually on flat ground. And then you go from 12 to 13 and they ask you all of a sudden to play on a 90-foot diamond.
Yeah.
And now that shortstop throw that you had on the 60-foot diamond is twice as far. It literally looks like it's twice as far. Now you got 90 feet to run to first base on the ground ball you hit, not 60. Somebody's got to make that throw. And now the pitcher is 60 feet, 6 inches from the plate. Now, there are some gradations. There are different leagues that go 46 to 54 to whatever. But that kind of jump when you're in that age frame. And I'll tell you, what's weird about development, my friend House, has studied all of this stuff, and he shows that a lot of major league players, a lot of Hall of Famers were late bloomers. And if you look at the sports, and of course, my favorite one to tell, and everybody's heard it a million times, I think it's fascinating that Lawrence Taylor did not play organized football till he was 16.
Yeah.
16. He is literally where he grew up is like 5 miles from where I'm sitting right now. And I'm a Skins fan. He beat the hell out of us, but I got to give the man credit. It's the greatest football player I've ever seen. I mean, Sean Taylor was the best I ever saw live, But anyway, to get into that, he was a baseball guy. And then some, high school coach was like, man, you need to play football. He gets pushed around a little bit, but then he becomes Lawrence Taylor. And if you go back and tell somebody that, you're like, oh no, at 12, nobody knew at 12 he was going to be Lawrence Taylor, because he didn't really become that until he was at Carolina in college. But on the baseball side, I worked with this kid about a year ago, and I'll just say this: he played high level Division I, 6'5" catcher. And I'd heard through the rumor mill, he went from a D2 to a D1. He went in the portal and he transferred and went to a very high end school. And I'm talking to him. I'm like, yeah, you're a little bit of the late bloomer there, aren't you? And he goes, Coach, you don't have any idea. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, check this out. And he pulls up a picture, his freshman year in high school. He's 5'3", 115 pounds.
Wow.
And he's got a backpack on. He goes, Coach, I was a little nerd. Everybody slapped me around the hallway. Everybody's picking on me. Then I go on this 6-inch growth spurt one time. And then, Carl, the dude's 6'5". And I'm like, you were that small as a freshman? So nobody saw that coming. Now, he's a pro prospect, but imagine a kid 13, 14. He hasn't broken 5'5" yet. And then he goes on that kind of growth spurt. So he could not, in the developmental years of being a kid, have really gained a whole hell of a lot out of it, because he was a kid. He was an undersized kid, but he stuck with it and he played through the game. But another thing, and you and I, again, it sounds like we're about a decade apart in age, but I think that what kids are going through today with this whole fragmentation of society, we don't have the same common interests. Like that story you're telling me about being a bat boy or a clubhouse boy when you were in Richmond, Virginia, the guys that were coming through, the names that you were seeing, man, that shaped you as a young kid.
Yeah.
But the experiences we had growing up was what was in the paper, the one game of the week on NBC, where we got to see the stars. So in that 80s, so when the Tigers won it in 84 against the Padres, the guys that were playing then, and then the 86 World Series, like you said, I'm a Red Sox fan, and the Mets did it, we did it to ourselves kind of, but the games seemed kind of magical and the stars seemed kind of big. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of what we ran into the other day with these kids, they're not growing up like you did in the 50s and idolize Willie and Duke, Duke Snyder and Mickey Mantle. Like every kid in America was watching those three center fielders, right? That was part of just growing up in America. I don't think these kids really are probably having any exposure other than what gets posted where it's a bat flip or it's something usually probably negative about the game.
Yeah.
That's the only things they really see. But tell me more about, because we're in this world and I have great guys on like you. I do a show every once in a while with the kid that played in the big leagues for a while and love this guy. And everybody's saying kind of the same things because we're old school. I mean, the kid I'm doing with the big league background, he's 38, but everybody's coming down on, and I think rightfully so, what travel ball has created as the gateway to college and potentially professional baseball, et cetera, because it excludes a lot of kids based upon money. The kids without money have to really shine early. So all these late bloomers we're talking, they're going to get missed because no travel team is scholarshiping, as they say, scholarshiping some kid that at 14 doesn't look like the goods. But he may not show the goods until 19. He's going to get missed. You know what I'm saying?
No, for sure.
So what do we do? What things are you doing right now with baseball as far as working with kids and things like that to get them opportunities?
So, and that's a great question. So my personal organization is called Sluggers Baseball. I started it back in 2018 and got my 501c3 and everything because when my son and I showed up to the field, it wasn't a lot of representation. It would be, and my specific team, I would try to get some diversity on my team and I would get a black player here and there and they would just kind of fall off, whether it be, them not coming to practice or choosing to go to their other practices because, they were multi-sport athletes.
Yes.
And so, but I created Sluggers Baseball so I could get, if kids couldn't afford to be in the space, I could get grants, I could get people to donate and come into the facility and pay some startup fees or, help buy uniforms or whatever I could do to help. And like you said, it's a very expensive sport. It's big business. Sports in general is like $1 billion industry right now. Baseball is, if you can't really afford to play in these spaces, it's tough. So travel ball can have a bad name, bad reputation, but it's some really good stuff in travel baseball as well. The transition that you were talking about, the field size. 9 and 10, you play 46, 65. 11, 12, you play 50, 70. And then you kind of transition. I think travel baseball does a good job of transitioning, from one field size to the next. And then you go from that 50, 70 to 60 and a half, 90.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a huge jump, but it is a significant jump. And so by me having a 501c3, we can do a lot of fundraising and stuff like that to help young people get into space. So that's one of the things. I do discounted lessons, and I love RBA West for this. They let me get cage time in there, and kids who really can't afford, those $90 an hour lessons. I get a chance to get in there and work with kids. I could charge them like for the cage rental, $20 for that hour, and they get a detailed hitting lesson or fielding lesson or catching lesson or whatever their needs are at the time. They allow me to do that, and so I'm pretty. I've been with them 8-9 years now, and they really support me in that way. So it's some good organizations around that do stuff that is kind of unseen.
I think one of the models, though, that's broken down. All right, I'm looking from this because I don't know. I think the last time I counted, the number of hands-on instruction I did with kids that made it to the big leagues is somewhere 16, 18, 19 kids, and probably 100 that played pro ball. And I say that to say I helped a lot of them get into college. They went the college route. But when you're in it and you're around a lot of kids that have success or different levels of success, you see it from the ground level. Like I was in a building with David Wright when he was 11. I was in a building with Mark Reynolds when he was 12. I had Josh Roop at 11. So, Michael Kadar, I think the first time I was around Michael was 15, 16. Jason Du Bois played in the big leagues, went to VCU, was 14, 15. And I say this, these guys are like sons or nephews or something. You build a relationship, but you see what they go through and you see how it all started for them. And when I was growing up, and you probably had a similar situation, one thing everybody knew in a community, and I grew up in Bowling Green, 40 miles north of Richmond, so it's in Caroline County, and it's a pretty rural area. But my area, like pretty much every area I thought in that part of Virginia, we grew up not far apart, you could go sign up and play Little League. You're going to get a shot at Little League. And then I think the way it went back then, which I think is actually better, everybody played and everybody figured out where they were in the pecking order. And you got to a point, then it was 8th grade year, go out for JV. You're good enough to make JV or you're not good enough to make JV, but you've played Little League. So you've gone 8, 9, 10, 11. You've gone through those years. Now when you hit that 13, 14, you go out for the school team. And usually if you're not good enough to make it then, you're not good enough to play baseball at another level, move on. But everybody had a shot. Everybody had a shot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So in that kind of environment, I know when I was in high school, we had a lot of really good athletes, really good. We were really good at basketball. We were really good at football. We had speed. We had hitters in football. We had some guys that could play. We didn't have a lot of grades, so a lot of guys didn't go on to college. Some of the guys, and believe me, when I went to junior college at Chowan and saw the football team, I said, man, there were some guys at home that would, but they didn't get out of Bowling Green. But when you're growing up and you're around guys, you're like, those guys could play with anybody. Yeah, they have no grades. Sure. No one in their family's ever gone to college. They don't go. Well, we had some basketball players, some football players. It was a lot of mix of guys that had played other sports in the school. But it was a certain amount of environment. You play. That's kind of what the mindset was. And this is what's changed too. You played every sport you could. You wanted to walk down the hall and have the pretty girls look at you, and you had letters on your jacket because you played sports. I mean, that's what drove all of us, I think, was, is like you want to be somebody in the school kind of thing. So you played all the sports. And what I started to see even 25 years ago with high-end guys I was working with, they started to drop out of other sports because they start to see the big picture. I might get a big signing bonus. I might get drafted. I can't afford to play football. What if I get hurt? So the sports whole dynamic has changed, but clearly what's changed is the gateway has changed because it's become this, if they're not getting on the right programs early, as you know, they're not only going to not get the development, they just don't. I just really think you get better playing the game. Like take basketball. Let's take basketball. And I know you've seen the films. I saw something on YouTube recently where, what is the famous court? I think it's in Harlem. I know it's in the city.
Rucker Park.
Yes.
Rucker.
Yeah.
Rucker.
And I'm watching a video, and I know you've probably seen this. It is Julius Erving going there to play. And the guys they're interviewing guys, I don't know if this Dr. J can hang here. I'm like, damn, it's Julius Erving.
Right.
And then they're talking to three guys that, are now up in age that played in the NBA. And they said it was never as tough as playing in the streets in the city. So, you're going to get in there and you're going to sharpen some iron there. So whatever basketball, you get that hard top and you get that street, you get that city park. Some guys are going to get better there.
Yeah.
But what do you need? You need a ball. You need sneakers and a ball, right?
That's it. Yeah.
And the city's going to provide a hoop and a backboard and all that kind of stuff. Football's tough, but we all grew up with somebody's going to pay for the helmets and shoulder pads. That's the school. But I remember playing organized football. If you were a kid, was cost prohibitive. And I don't know that you need to be playing at 12, to be honest with you. I think it's kind of sport that might be, so the NFL's going to this flag football. They're putting flag football everywhere to get kids at least exposed to the game. Good move, because I don't think they need to be having contact at that age. But baseball used to be the sport. You could get a hand-me-down glove. They're going to give you a T-shirt to wear. I remember my first year, everybody wore blue jeans, and then, going to game pants was like a huge, right? So I just think baseball, man, what you're talking about now, and these kids, I'm coaching in college now, and the bats are $450, five something. The gloves are $400.
Yeah.
And
I have a 16-year-old that wants the latest bats and latest gloves, so I know exactly how much they cost. But it's ironic in certain communities, a kid is not going to own a glove.
Right. No, you're right.
When we went in that elementary school,
we had to bring them.
We had gloves for them, and they didn't know which hand to put the gloves on.
I know.
Or it looked so foreign to them.
I saw that.
I throw with my right hand. Why can't I put the glove on my right hand? And they were just
asking
questions.
You're right.
And it was, so it's like a foreign object. They know what a bat is, but when they grab it, their hands are this far apart. It's like, the game of baseball is just so foreign in certain communities. And then, like I was speaking about before, over in Hanover, they have athlete little league. They have,
that's right.
They have really good little leagues in certain areas where hundreds of kids can come and play, but they may have 8 to 10 teams in one age division,
right.
And then from those teams, they pick an all-star team to compete, regionally and nationally if they're lucky enough to go that far. But certain areas just really provide a good space for those kids to start at 4 years old. And then other communities like, in North, like I'm from Northside Richmond, and, Hoskins Field tries to do a good job. I used to coach at Battery Park, so I used to try to get kids to, introduce baseball. But, you have some kids like, okay, I can play a varsity sport. I'll go out for the baseball team, and they don't have any experience. So,
right.
The city programs aren't that good right now, and they're fighting an uphill battle. And so, some guys and I, a couple years ago, what we did, invited a lot of high school players out on Sundays from 4 to 6 at Henrico High School. And, just to get a workout, just to try to get some extra reps because those kids just don't have an opportunity to do it. And so it's tough. It's tough. And so that's the part of it that we're trying to change. So programs like we did where you and I
Yeah.
met,
Yeah.
it kind of sparked the interest, but then it'll die down if you don't have anybody come in and really working with those kids on a regular basis, because it's a hard game. It's a hard
You know
sport.
what? I think this has to be addressed too, because I mentioned before we went on, and I've said this in many shows. In the part of the world I grew up, it's kind of famous in some. My dad's in a picture up here. My father was the sheriff that defeated, or he's the man that defeated the sheriff that arrested the Lovings. So the biracial marriage case, Loving versus Virginia. When I met people like, oh, I've heard of that story. I was like, yeah, well, that happened in my home county. What? And I was like, yeah, and it was very common. A lot of Native Americans, a lot of blacks, a lot of whites, a lot of intermingling of the races. And that was a community where they were married, where somebody made a complaint. It was a valid warrant at the time to say they were legally married in DC. But anyway, what I'm saying is where I grew up, I don't know exactly what the demographics were, but I would say my high school was probably pretty close to 50-50.
Okay.
So if you play football, there was 35 black guys and 5 white guys. Basketball, there might be a white guy played every 5 years or so. And then baseball, we were 8-8. We were 16 guys. It was 8-8. And that's what I said. I grew up with 2 guys that, played in the amateur black leagues, and I went with them because they were my guys. I mean, not saying, I know it sounds all cliche, but they were my brothers, and we loved each other. And that's how we grew up. So I think I grew up in a pretty special place for all of that. When I would go out, and I mentioned this, and I would talk to now I'm talking about in the 80s when I was playing, I would talk to a lot of elderly black gentlemen, and they loved baseball. And when I was in North Carolina, it was the same thing. I worked with a black kid that ended up playing pro ball, and his father used to talk about my uncle played, my other uncle played, and he would tell these stories about Northeastern North Carolina, and in every field somewhere behind a restaurant, something, they were playing baseball.
Yeah.
And so that's the world I grew up in. So I say that to say that same kid from North Carolina was 6'6". His dad's 6'8". And he was gifted. I mean, he was gifted, and he pitched in pro ball for a while. And he told me one time, he goes, Coach, you know what really annoys the hell out of me? Is the way he goes, white kids and black kids. Everybody's going, why aren't you playing basketball? Why are you playing a white man sport? So he's a black kid, 6'6", that can throw 98. Right? He could run, he could hit, he could do everything. But he would tell me, he goes, culturally, I catch a lot of heat about why aren't you playing basketball kind of thing.
For sure.
So I get that from the kids that I've had really close relationships with. I think what spun over time is, well, I remember this about scouts saying like there were no black catchers at all anymore. But when you went back in the 50s and 60s with Campanella, who was black and Italian, and Johnny Rosborough, there were some star black catchers. And then all of a sudden there were none. And then they said, okay, you're a young kid growing up and you're trying to identify and you're looking at somebody and go, yeah, I could be him. Right. And you don't see that anymore. So,
yeah.
And I think that's what started to happen with eating away black kids playing professional baseball. And this is the thing everybody needs to read, is Left Out by Andrew McCutcheon. He wrote that when they stripped that title from the kids in Chicago.
That was heartbreaking.
It was. And he wrote an article. And he said, as a 4'3" runner, undersized guy, but a wide receiver, defensive back, grew up in Florida, and a 3'8" student, this is what he said. I had banked my future as a young black male on getting a college education through football. Hurt my knee my junior year, all the scholarship offers dry up. Florida State comes in and offers 70%. Well, with 11.3 scholarships for a fully funded school, if you're giving 100%, it's to your Friday night starter in your bullpen. I mean, in your top flight pitchers. 70% for an outfielder is a lot. But he's like, now mom and dad got to come up with the other 30%. Pirates come in, and realistically, as a 12th overall pick, I don't want to disparage the Pirates. They gave him his opportunity, but it was kind of a low ball for 12th overall pick. And he goes, now I'm a young black man with good grades. I bypassed college to play professional baseball. 5 years in the minors, I don't know what it's going to take to get to the big leagues.
Right.
So he goes, young black males are looking at it like, if I can play basketball or football and I can get to the NFL or the NBA, I'm getting paid. I'm going to get a check coming out of camp. If I make the team, if I'm a high draft choice, I totally get it. So I say all that to say, I just think the culture is so different. I grew up loving Aaron. I grew up loving Mays. And one of the greatest human beings I've ever met face to face, Lou Brock. I loved Lou Brock, right? So I was a young white kid growing up where I grew up. Jim Rice was one of my favorite players, right? So, I was a Red Sox fan. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, I saw black players and I thought they were stars. And so I could understand kids then seeing that. And since the numbers have dwindled so much,
right,
and the fact that it's a different structure to get to the highest level.
Yeah.
I think it's becoming
tougher. Yeah. And getting tougher.
And let me just say one other really interesting story because I find it fascinating. I see this interview with Ricky Henderson years ago. Ricky Henderson, who I thought was one of the greatest baseball players ever, the best leadoff guy ever. So
for sure.
He grows up, I think, in the Oakland area. And he said, I wanted to play basketball because all the girls came to the game, got to see my good-looking legs. He said that.
Yeah.
And he was a football player with huge scholarship offers. He didn't give anything about baseball, but he had a teacher who I think father had a Negro League background or so. She just loved baseball. She said, Ricky, if you'll go out and play, you steal a base, I'll give you a quarter. You get a hit, I give you a quarter. Mm-hmm. So he said, I literally was making enough money to take a girl out. It was always about girls with him, right?
Yeah.
And then he gets so good that a scout comes out one day and said, hey, we're with the Oakland A's, we're going to draft you. He goes, what does that mean? You're going to draft me what? So then when he gets the opportunity to play pro ball, but isn't it interesting that a Hall of Fame caliber player like he wasn't picking baseball first?
Right.
He thought it was kind of boring.
It's like that to this day. My son will even tell you, so he plays varsity baseball at St. Christopher's, and he's like, nobody comes to the games.
Yes.
Like, it's like only the parents and maybe the siblings. Nobody goes out to watch just a baseball game. And so it's discouraging because even when I was in school, Friday nights, everybody was at the football game.
Yes.
Some basketball games we played, we had to play at the Arthur Ashe Center because like TJ or John Marshall's gym couldn't hold the crowd. So, it was 4,000 people in Arthur Ashe and it was packed. Baseball, nobody was at the baseball games, and so, and it's still like that. Unless like you go to a school like Atlee where they have a big baseball community, and I keep saying them because it's like one of those things where they have a good culture and
no doubt
just a baseball fan base in that area.
That's right.
And, a draft, a potential, a kid that throws 98 over there, everybody wants to see. But, it's just one of those things where if you don't live in one of those areas or you're in or if it's not a big fan base, nobody's coming to the games. And it's discouraging, when you just you hit home runs or you make spectacular plays and, nobody's talking about it in school the next day. I feel for them because, that's a part of the high school experience. When you had a great game on Friday night football, Monday, people are patting you on the back.
Yeah.
Or that evening, we're going to Pizza Hut and everybody's kind of cheering you on. But, it's just not like that. And that discourages players from playing at a young age, too. So,
but
it's a lot of factors.
But part of the male experience, if we're honest and you and I are going to be honest, of course we're going to be honest. We look to our peers or we look to our competition and we go, man, that guy could really throw or that guy could really run or, man, if you played football, like, man, I tell you what, that guy hit me. Like I listened to Bo Jackson the other day. It's the greatest story. Did you see the one where they were like, Bo, did you ever get got? He goes, oh, yeah. Some people, he goes, we're playing the Cardinals one day. And he said, we ran a play. And I get basically, it's kind of like, it's kind of like the sucker play, the trap play, and somebody's not blocked. But he said, this guy hit me and he had muscles in his breath. And the guys start laughing. He's talking about Ken Harvey. He went on to play with the Redskins. That guy was like a specimen, like nobody fat guy. But he says, this guy lights me up. So it's Bo Jackson. But what I'm saying is funny about it is Bo Jackson is saying, yeah, my guy got me. He hit me. So when you play football, there's some times somebody really lights you up and you're like, hey, I got to respect that. I get that.
For sure.
And, you get struck out in baseball. So that was one of the things about those older gentlemen when I was playing, basically in these black leagues in rural Virginia. they would talk, I saw a guy who was the fastest I ever saw, hit the ball the farthest. They talked in those terms of superlatives, guys that had great ability. So I think that's something that's been lost too, is that in the culture, the kids are now generations away from that. They're not hearing their grandfather stories anymore about great black players or what they saw and things like that. And so they're sort of separated from that. But I do think there's that point that you're right when it comes to every athlete to some degree, or you're not very good at it, you want to show off.
Yeah.
It's a reason to play.
It's a reason to play. You want people to see it. I think one of the local recruiting baseball report, PBR.
Yeah.
They've been doing a really good job covering high school baseball and travel baseball. They're getting, the kids are, seeing themselves on Twitter, and they do a good job videoing those guys and putting metrics up there and really trying to get exposure and get just that notoriety to those guys. They have the rankings, and that they've created a really good business model, but it also is create that they're creating buzz for the players. I know my son, if he gets a good hit or if he hits a home run, he's like right after the game, he's in the car trying to find this clip on Twitter, especially if it's a PBR tournament. He's trying to find this clip. And so they're creating like excitement like that. But you have to be in it. You have to play at a high level. And so on the lower levels that we're talking about, it's nothing that, makes you excited to, it's nothing really that draws you to the sport.
I think you're right. And I think another thing too is, I'm coaching right now at a junior college where we got in the bullpen yesterday, and I had one kid that spoke no English. He's Dominican. So I turned to one of my kids from Panama. I'm like, all right, who's my interpreter? Okay, you got it. And this kid's smiling, beaming, but he's like, Coach, I don't speak a lot of English. And I'm like, okay, I'm still trying to figure out Spanish. But what I'm saying is, you get around these kids, and I got so many Dominican friends. And I remember seeing a documentary years ago, and it was a bunch of Dominican kids. They showed them going from the islands into pro ball. And this was 20 years ago. And when they were asked, like, why do you do it? And it's put food on the table for mom and dad, but also to prove to the world we are the best baseball players.
Yeah.
And that's 20% of Major League Baseball is Dominican. So I have a friend of mine who is Latin American, and he told me like 20 years ago, he said, hey, man, it's not going to be long before all of Major League Baseball is Latin American and Asian. And I'm like, man, you might be right. And he goes, black kids aren't playing, and the game is becoming a country club sport. Yeah. Let's face it. So the kids that can afford to play get their bags and their $500 bats, and then they get their asses kissed when they get to college, and they go through that whole experience. And it's not the minor league bus rides and it's all that. That's what I'm saying something about a generation, and maybe it's not fair, but there is a little softness that's kind of moved into the sport. So, but the Dominican kids not thinking about, now I know some Dominican kids said they've played soccer, they've played basketball, they have done other sports, but it's kind of become the national thing. If you're a Dominican kid and it's sports, you're pretty much considered going to go play professional baseball. And they do it pretty well, right?
Yes.
And they're doing it okay. And the Asian kids have proved kind of the same thing. So I think what I'm driving, and I think you're in agreement with me, until black kids, again, identify with that meaning something within their culture, then it doesn't really mean anything. And there's outliers. There's guys like McCutcheon that I love. But remember Lorenzo Cain a few years ago goes on to be an all-star. He got cut in basketball, cries his eyes out, and then goes and starts playing baseball to have something to do.
Yeah.
And then the scouts start coming in, and he's kind of like, why are the scouts coming around? Because you run a 6.360 or whatever it was. I mean, he was crazy fast. But there's another guy. He's in the All-Star game. He's in World Series. He didn't pick baseball first. Now, I met a guy from Florida that actually went to high school with him, baseball guy. And I was like, man, he must have been a hell of an athlete to have gotten cut. He goes, dude, our basketball team was like in the top 5 in the country. And I said, oh, really? He goes, oh, yeah. When you hear that story that he didn't make it in basketball, like nobody made it in basketball at this school. Everybody was crazy NBA level or big college guys. So it was no shame to have not made that basketball team, is what he said. And I was like, okay. And he goes, yeah, and he pivots to baseball and he picks it up real fast. He just picks it up. So, but yeah, I think you and I talked about this when we first met. I would hope that there becomes a time, and everybody I talk to, there's of kind of the same mind. I don't know how we do it. I really don't know how we do it. I kind of have a model in my head. I'd like to see a situation where good baseball people show up at fields every day. Very much like what we did in the building, but we show up, bring the bats and balls, let kids play. But not that kind of supervise where all we're there to do is to oversee and make sure the kids are safe and let them play.
Safe.
Right.
Yeah.
And let them play.
Like we used to play roly-poly, stickball.
Yeah.
Like we were swinging bats, like whether we were using a tennis ball or something like that. We were, getting those cuts. Back when we were, coming up, we learned how to play pepper.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. It's a
like
lost
all
art.
of those things, when we had those opportunities, and now, it's not readily available like that. So now, what I've been in the travel world,
Mm-hmm.
I've been seeing down in Atlanta, like their black baseball is alive and well, right?
Yeah, I was down there twice this summer. I saw some athletes. Yeah, I did.
And
I saw some good-looking kids.
Yeah, minority baseball prospects.
Yeah.
They have an organization called MVP down there.
Yes.
They're doing some top level stuff.
I agree with
Marquise Grisham and they have a facility down there. Like it's some really good ball players down there, and they have a lot of support. That's baseball country. When we go down there to Lake Point or one of those facilities down there, like they have a baseball store called Better Baseball down there. That's like the baseball heaven for a kid, right?
That's right.
It's baseball country, and it's alive and well down there, and it's a lot of diversity in the sport. And I think that can be replicated, but the resources, when you get to areas like here in Richmond, everybody's so fractured because everybody's fighting for the small amount of resources, right?
Yeah.
So I've been in different meetings, different collaborations with other people who have organizations to try to work together. And when it starts coming to like the resources, nobody wants to open up those doors. So I've been doing my thing for like, if you look at black baseball here in Richmond, you're going to get, and you have a 5-year-old, let's say, that plays baseball, you're going to get one of like 3 or 4 names, right? Milton Parker, Carl Smith, Steve Smith, or you're going to get like a couple names throughout the network. You can't really do that here without coming in contact with one of us, right? But we're not the people who have the RBIs, or the other people have those organizations, and we try to work with them. But when it comes to the resources, nobody really shares the resources. So it's hard to develop kids, because all of us have that desire to not only introduce the game, but really develop those players so they can flourish. Nobody likes to play baseball and stand in the field for 30, 40 minutes because you can't get out of the inning. And my pitcher's not throwing strikes, or we can't make outs and all of that kind of stuff. So if we introduce the game, we want to get those kids good, but it's very difficult if they don't come in the travel space. So I've been blessed to be able to work with the Virginia Seminoles for, like I said, 8-9 years, and I brought a team over there. But it's like one of those things where I joined them because they had a facility where I could get in there and get kids better, and they allowed me to train kids, and I do lessons, I do paid lessons, but they've given me the autonomy to get in there and train kids who really can't afford it, or run my practices where I do a lot of skill building in practice. And so my practices are sometimes slower, but they're really efficient when they get on the field, and they can throw the ball with a tight 4-seam spin, or they get their eyes behind the ball when they're catching, and they get those small things, those small nuggets to make them consistent players. But if you don't have if you don't have a place to really train those kids in the wintertime, they kind of fall off. Like, and it's hard for a kid that plays other sports. Like my son plays football, but we hit once or twice a week just so he can, because that's his primary sport.
Exactly.
But if he just played football and didn't get a chance to, hit or do whatever in the off season, then back in February, fast forward to February when you have to try out for a team, you're not sharp. You're playing catch up for the kid that plays or practices baseball all year round. So if you don't have that access, it's hard to get really good at that game. And so I think other places have, resources and stuff that put in place where kids can really flourish, and I wish we could collaborate more here. And we have those meetings. We come to the table, and then at the end of it, we're kind of at square one, especially when we start talking about, all right, where is the money to kind of rent space, or like or let's come together and try to get a facility. RBI has facilities in other places that, provide, support and resources for kids who may not be able to afford, to be in the space. But if a place like Richmond is kind of hard. It's kind of hard for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine reaching, the ages both of us have, that we sometimes think that things might have been a lot better, in the past when it comes to a lot of what we did, and how we grew up. And I know it was a lot simpler.
Simpler.
We didn't have the phones, and probably what our objectives were. There was just so much that, and I've probably told you this before, and I know I've said it before on shows. When a lot of this really struck me was when I'm an attorney and I was doing player representation 25 years ago with a friend of mine. And some of those kids were starting to hit the college age that I'd worked with growing up, the kids that had grown up with me. And there was this one guy, I loved him. He was phenomenal. He was like 6'6". He was probably in his late 60s back in the year 2003, 4, something like that. And he pitched in the major leagues, and he was a scout with, I think he was with the White Sox at the time, but he always had a chew in, 6'6". Just, he's your uncle. He's just a beautiful guy. He's the guy you wanted to be your uncle, hang out and just talk to. And I remember him telling me stories about Ted Williams and playing for the Red Sox and all the things he saw. And one day he said to me, he said, Jackie, he always called me Jackie. He said, Jackie, did you ever play in the sandlot ball? I said, yeah, absolutely. He goes, that's what's wrong with kids today. Now, he's saying this in the early 2000s. And he said, what'd you learn from sandlot? And I'm like, I don't know. We just kind of like mimicked the people we saw on TV, the big leaguers. Yep. He goes, yeah, but you learn to play together. How many parents around? I'm like, none. When'd you go home? When mom called us for dinner, when it got dark enough, right? He's going through the checklist there. And he goes, who made the rules? I said, either the kid that could kick everybody else's ass or the one that brought the ball. He goes, right. Yeah. And he goes, did y'all settle your own disputes? I said, yes, sir. And he goes, what did you think of your first coach in organized baseball? I'm like, guy that wrote the lineup. I mean, literally, it's kind of like we thought he writes the lineup. But, growing up, we didn't have a lot of instruction.
Yeah.
But we watched TV and we learned how to throw the right base. And, we learned the game kind of from what we heard Joe Garagiola and Tony Kubek say on a game of the week. We learned a lot of baseball from paying attention.
Yeah.
And we were looking at the very best players in baseball. And we'd go out to Parker Field, then the Diamond. We'd go to these games and see Major League or AAA baseball. So we had all these experiences. We read a lot. I mean, I remember reading a lot about baseball. So then when I started getting around people, and I will say a lot of my favorite people in baseball by far are professional baseball people, not because, they're pro people. They look at the game differently.
They look at it different.
And I'll tell you what, I had a college buddy of mine one time say this. We're both coaching. He's a PhD from the University of Virginia. And we're in the dugout together. We're kind of looking off at the horizon. He goes, we're coaching in junior college together. He goes, you know what I just realized? This is what he goes, you're teaching these kids to play pro ball. And I went, no, I never thought about that. You're right. Sure. Everything was about how you carried yourself. Yep. And he's like, I just dawned on me, you're not a college coach. And I'm like, no, I'm really not.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
ever
No,
talk
that's
about
funny.
the program and how the program makes me look. I'm always thinking like, how do I develop you as a player?
Out of what? Yeah. Because, and I learned that at 12. Man, being in a pro
Yes,
clubhouse, when I played catch with those guys, they would not let me just do it any kind of way.
that's
They
right.
taught me how to spin the ball.
Yes.
They taught me how to catch the ball, how to work with two hands. I was in the line playing pepper with those guys.
Yeah.
They just kind of let me, kind of just do everything with them.
That's awesome.
And man, I had a pitcher named Jose Calderon.
Mm-hmm.
He was with Toronto at the time. I mean, with Syracuse at the time. And he was telling me about pitch sequencing, and I'm learning that at 12. He
Yeah.
was showing me how to throw different pitches, telling me why he threw, the hard, four seam, and then a hard breaking ball, and then off speed. We were talking about, just stuff on a different level. And so when I coach now, I'm coaching my kids to practice like pros. So
Exactly.
it's, I don't let them just play catch any kind of way. It's a, and they know they become better defenders by playing catch the right way. And I learned that just kind of being in a clubhouse with pros. It was an awesome experience for me, just to learn to do stuff the right way. And I learned very early that everything mattered. Those
Yeah.
guys were
Yeah.
trying to get to the big leagues, and they played catch like they were trying to get called up.
That's right.
Every single thing mattered, and I learned that very early. And that's my superpower with coaching now. I can take kids that have a love for the game, and if they want to play next level stuff, they buy into that kind of slow, methodical, repetitious stuff. And I think that's a big thing that American kids versus kids like Dominican kids. American kids, we have all of the technology,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so every time we're playing a video game, we push a button and we get a response, right? When I get one of my players to go out and swing a PVC to learn how to whip their barrel through the zone, well, they don't like to do that because they don't know how that's helping them, right?
Yeah. That's a good point.
When I get them to do the towel drill, how to really reach out and have your momentum coming forward, they don't really like to do those things because it doesn't have a result at the end of it. I can't see if I threw a strike. I can't
Wow.
see if I hit a ball, right? But if you take the way they train in other places, they're building skill just constantly, doing dry reps. They don't necessarily have to throw a ball or hit a ball to get better. American kids don't really like to practice like that. And even to my son, I bought my son all types of contraptions, like a heavy bag so he can turn and
Yeah.
explode through the
Yeah.
heavy bag. And I would come home and be like, hey, buddy, you hit your bag today? No, I didn't hit it today. Right. And so, but if I take him to a cage, he wants to hit. Like he doesn't duck that.
Right.
But he has to see the flight of the ball. He has to, and so, but a kid trying to play to get off an island, or if you tell him to go hit a bag for 10 minutes a day, he's going to be out there hitting a bag.
Yeah,
right?
but they're also the ones that take sticks and hit bottle caps, and they're just.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting thing you said, because the phenomenon I'm going through right now. Matter of fact, I gave my speech yesterday. I was salty with the team; they loved me for it, but I was no. I told one of the kids yesterday. I said, "What did you start off in the spring when I came here? What were you throwing? Like 86? I'm sorry, 87, 88. What did you hit high in the spring, Coach? I touched some 91s and 92s. How many times did I tell you to throw harder? Never. What do? We got more mechanically efficient, Coach. I said, yeah. And velocity comes with better movements, better improvement. So the reason I say that is there were kids last summer or last spring when I worked with them, and they'd be the first ones to tell you, cannot throw strikes at all. They have no command whatsoever. So they're telling me about these places they're in that have the Rapsodo, and but Coach, my spin rate's 27-13, right? And I'm like, yeah, and you just missed a spot by 13 inches, right? Okay, so There's a sign out now. I've seen that they have it at ballparks. Nobody cares the velocity on ball 4 you just threw or something like that. So,
That's right.
but what I started to see is they have that kind of feedback. And I was watching Trevor Bauer on a video the other day, and it was interesting. He is looking directly at a readout after a pitch. So he's throwing a sinker, and he went, oh, that had vertical this and horizontal that. So he's getting feedback on how the pitch actually reacted. But what I was starting to get from the kids is that they think a pitch that has a whatever, horizontal, vertical, whatever the dimensions, a drop or a movement of X kind of really matters if it's nowhere near the zone. It's like, yeah, the guys in this building that are telling me how to throw harder, they're like, hey, you're vertical, whatever. So what I know too, from doing a lot of study with my buddy Tom House, he has a series of pictures that he shows of John Smoltz from like 3 different seasons. And you see Atlanta and you see Braves and the combination of the two, and his gloves in a position, his hands out front at release, and they are different times within 3 years. And he's in the exact same spot. So I say that to say this. Yeah. Part of what they found with study of Smoltz that made him so incredibly effective, if it was, let me get the screen here, fastball through it, he's in the slider, he's in the change, whatever he did, the pitch stayed in a cone longer than anyone else they measured. So wow. If you're the hitter, and he's 91 to 93, he closed in the upper 90s, but when he was a starter, he's 91 to 94, and the slider's fill in the blank. It's got X amount of, horizontal break or whatever. Thing is, the hitter has no earthly idea what any of that is for 21 feet out of his hand.
Right.
That's what made him good.
That's impossible. Yeah.
Right. And it's not a question of, what I'm saying is these kids are like the size of the break. So it's not, and I try to explain to them, like, guys, and this is why Mariano Rivera was so incredible. Like, I've literally seen the tracking of what the baseball actually is. He threw straight as a string turned. So when he threw that cutter, it was there, not. I mean, it was so close to the plate when the visual was that no. So he's eating up the right-hander, he's swinging and missing, left-hander, he's breaking the bat. That's because of the deception created by the fact the pitch stayed in a certain area and then moved late. So I'm telling these kids, if you're throwing something with this 29 inches of movement out of the hand and you're missing the zone, it's of no value.
Right.
It's how long did swing at that. Right. I said you need 3 pitches, 2 of which are not a fastball. Okay? And if you got fastball and everything out of your hand looks like fastball and then 2 of them are not, you're going to be okay.
You're going to be fine.
You're going to be fine. But I don't care how much vertical, horizontal, or whatever else you got if you're nowhere near the zone.
Right.
Or you give up what that is early. You're not deceptive. But that's the pitching thing. But it's not their fault. But I mean, I'm totally with what you're saying. They're you could say, go work on the whatever, it'll make you better. Like, well, I don't have a thing on my phone that tells me that makes me better.
Right. And the kids that buy into it, I have a few kids that really buy into it. Overall, they have to see some type of feedback.
Yeah.
And so I have a kid, one of my kids, he played for another coach, really good coach, the year before. And the coach wanted to make him a PO, mm-hmm. right? Because, he had what we call a small field swing.
Right.
And when he came to me, I gave him the PVC, and this kid, he wants to be better. He doesn't want to just be a PO. So he went and he started like practicing with the PVC and really creating whip in his bat. And so I would be in third base. I'd give him the sign and I'd say, swing it like you swing your PVC. And he hit his first home run as a 10U because he just like exploded through the ball. And after that, he started saying, okay, I don't have to kind of muscle up back here.
Right.
I can accelerate through the baseball and hit it hard. And so now he's hitting them off the fence, or when he hits them out their line drives, it's not like a small field, let the bat do all the work type of swing.
Right.
He has a whippy swing.
Right.
And so when kids do buy in and get that like confirmation that this stuff works, then, but the kids who don't try it or don't do those things to get better, they get better, but they don't get better as fast as the kids that actually, take 5 or 10 minutes and do their towel drill, do their PVC drill, or what have you. But it's tough getting them to actually do it. And the kids that do it, it's like their little secret. And so with me and Colin, my big guy, who if I give him that, hey, swing it like you swing your PVC. If I see his bat slowing down, less than 2 strikes, I'm like, dude, like that's not a damaged swing and a damaged count.
Right. That's right.
And when he, turns it loose, like it's like, okay, I hate for a kid to be on the other end, especially if they hit it back at the pitcher with the juiced up bat, with his size and a whippy swing. Like I wouldn't want my kid pitching to him, right? And so, but when they do buy in, they get better faster. And that's the part of it where a lot of kids don't have that faith that doing these small incremental things, work. They would rather have a hitting lesson. And I'm all for that. But I like to train kids with hitting lessons if their parents are going to pay for it. I like them to understand what's going on. If it's a kid that, he just does it to feel good, I kind of send them to other coaches. I don't feel right taking the parents' money.
Yeah.
If the kid isn't getting anything out of it. But I have some good kids that do train with me, and they can tell you what they're doing wrong. They can tell you what they're feeling as early as 9 and 10. So they're really mature hitters just because, hey, what did you do? Yeah, I didn't stay through at that time, or I tensed up early, or whatever. Whatever the case is, they can, explain to me what they did. And so, those are the lessons I do. But my first thing is, okay, all right, this is, the understanding of it. This is how we can create some more whip in your back. Go do this PVC. That's your homework. And the kids that want it, they come back, hey, coach, I did it for 5 minutes a day, and I can tell when I throw them that first pitch, okay, yeah, I see more whip now. And so, but, it's just a difficult thing because kids can get better, but they have to kind of buy in to the methodical, like, stuff that they can't see the actual result right then. It's like that. They don't buy into that 1% better every day type of thing, so.
Yeah, but the whole time you're saying that, I'm thinking about the fact, though, kind of like to what end, because again, I think so much of what in this whole conversation, all I keep kind of going back to how simple things were. And again, we're a decade or more apart, but I think when we were growing up, we thought we definitely wanted to be good at something, and we wanted to be productive at something. But I think also we thought in terms of, man, wouldn't it be great if it was a lightning strike and I became famous, but in something, right? So I think if your drive was to be a big leaguer, so I have a friend of mine who's quite a bit older than I am and love this guy, and he had a very successful major league career. And I've told this story before, but I think it makes a lot of sense because of where I think maybe some things have changed. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Tom House is a sports psychologist, and I've run this by him, and he had an interesting take on this too. But I'm coaching 15 years ago, junior college baseball, and we're on a bad streak. It's not good. We're just not playing well. So I take everybody to home plate before practice, and I won't use exactly the language, but I said, guys, what's wrong with you guys? And this guy looks at me and he goes, Coach, I don't think we're having any fun. And I went, this game is fun? What, supposed to be? Like, would your mom tell you that? And he was like, what's that supposed to mean? And he goes, you didn't have fun when you played? And I'm like, hell no, I never had fun when I played. Never did anything I enjoyed more than competition. But it wasn't fun. You didn't have fun. I'm like, hell no, because if I'm on the mound when I pitched, there was a good chance I'd get my ass handed to me if I lost focus. So I felt like, and I'm no tough guy at all, but I mean, I felt like you're in the street in a knife fight in the back alley. When you're in the midst of it, you probably don't enjoy it, but you damn sure want to come out of it alive, right? So now when it's over, you might go, that was okay, but I got through it. And I said, if you're on the field to have fun and I'm on the field to get you out from the mound, I'm going to whip your ass. I'm going to beat you.
Every time.
So my buddy House always talks about whenever you put result in front of process, you fail. So then it hit me. Yeah, you guys want to win, but you're not prepared to win.
You're not prepared.
So now that you're getting your ass handed to you, you're going to look at me and go, Coach, I don't feel like we're having any fun. So I say all that to say this buddy of mine had a very successful major league career. We're talking, he pitched till he was 38, and we're talking one day, and he goes, you know what, Jack? And I said, he goes, you know what I never got out of my head the whole time I was in the big leagues? And I said, what's that? He goes, I never wanted to get sent home to my small town and have to tell everyone why I failed. And I went, oh, shit, like, that's why you're good.
Yeah.
He literally never got off his back this idea that he could get sent home. And that's why he was good. So the guys that are like here to have fun, like, what the hell is that? So I've had some guys, I mean, play at the highest level. Like, kids should have fun. I'm like, well, I can understand being like last year when I was in the bullpen with my pitchers and we got a lot better. I've been around long enough to realize how to create a positive environment, tell jokes, pull each other's leg, do whatever. But hey, I give you the ball and you go out to the mound. And when we had bad results, I was actually telling the guys this yesterday. We had guys last year, and we got a lot better on the mound once I came involved, but they really didn't have a lot of structure. They were looking for a pitching coach. I knew the guys, so I go out there. But I told a couple of them yesterday, I said, one of the things that really disappointed me last year, we were in a game, we were getting boat race last year. I don't even know who it was, but somebody's beating the hell out of us. And we put a couple of guys in that didn't get a lot of opportunities up to that point. 6 runs later, they're pulled out. And then they make their way back down the bullpen. And one of them's like, Coach, I don't know how I can be expected to perform. I said, hey, whoa, no, dude.
Right.
Let me tell you something. This is exactly how I got my first college start. I got put in a blowout. I threw a scoreless. I got put in a blowout. I threw a scoreless. I got put in a blowout. We were losing, getting our ass kicked, and I threw well. And the coach looked at me one day and goes, Jack, you know what I've been kind of thinking? And every time I put you in, you've thrown well. You're going to start against, I said, guys, that's how I got my start, was getting him to notice that I kept throwing well when the game was out of question. I didn't feel a whole lot of pressure. Hell, the game's already over. You guys are going out there and giving up 6 more runs, and you're saying you can't pitch because the atmosphere doesn't feel good. Damn, go out there and pitch. Go out there and show us you can pitch.
Right.
There's no better time for a new guy to establish himself than in a blowout.
Yeah.
And what you're over here whining and bitching about, the conditions weren't quite right for you. Dude, we were down 11-0. Now it's 17.
Right.
So now we as coaches, when we talk about this debacle, when the game's over, we're not going to like what you did. And then you're going to bitch and moan to it. Why don't I ever get back on the mound? You'll get on the mound because when you had an opportunity, you didn't get anybody out.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm like, eventually, guys, it comes to that. And I had that talk with them yesterday too. I said, I've been right where you've been. You've been there too. You have definitely thought that there were coaches. Well, you know this from football. Boy, I used to hear this all the time as a football player in high school. Man, when we stop yelling at you, that's when you start worrying because then we don't care anymore. Right? And you used to go, you asshole, I wish you wouldn't yell at me that way. And you're thinking that. Then you're coaching, and then you realize they meant that. That's exactly what they meant.
No question.
If they're yelling at you, they still care.
Yeah, and they believe that you have something else in you.
That's exactly right.
When you stop correcting, when you stop, getting on them, when you stop, like, really having high expectations, when you stop that, it's like, yeah, this kid is at his peak. Like, he doesn't.
Or he's given up, or I don't care. Yeah, there's nothing more to bring out of him. He doesn't have any more guts. So when I look back at some of the guys that were the toughest on you, you go back later and you realize, man, those guys really cared about me.
Yep, teachers, coaches.
Exactly. Yeah. So I told those kids yesterday, I said, I can honestly tell you this. I have put in the lineup kids I could not stand. And I had kids that were on the bench. I wanted to marry my daughter, babysit the kid, the best kids on it. They couldn't play. So, guys, if you think that we play you or don't play you based upon how much we like you, it's not that. I'm telling you. When you're on our side of it and we're trying to win as coaches, we're not playing favorites. We would like some of them with less talented kids with better character to be better.
Right.
But don't get it wrong. I mean, there comes a time when your crummy act eventually becomes to be too much or too much of a drag on the system, whatever. And then your ass may be out the door too, but understand it's not a popularity contest. But we've been there. I said, I've been there as a kid. And, sometimes when it's not going quite right on your playing time or something, like, coach just doesn't like me or something. Yeah. Most of the time it's just they don't believe in you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that trust that I try to tell players about, and so a lot of my guys that I had from the time they were 8, now they're in the years where they're starting to get recruited or have committed. And it's a really good feeling seeing these guys, to come through and they're starting to commit or just get a lot of college interest, right? But in those younger years, when I'm really like getting them to focus on detailed, small stuff, I'm like, man, when you go on your high school field or trying to, you try for your high school team, your coach has to trust you when he's playing for a state championship.
That's right.
Like, this is in travel. It's not travel. Like, we can go out and play a tournament one weekend. If we don't win, we can go back next weekend and play in another tournament. When you're playing in the regional finals and he's going to have his best 9 on the field, he's going to have his best 9 in the lineup, he's going to have his best guy on the mound if he hasn't used them already, because those are the guys he trusts, because he wants to win that game to get, to keep going. And when you leave it, when you don't work in a way where you're trying to gain your coach's trust, like, you just feel like, yeah, I have the ability, I have the talent, but I haven't built the skill for my coach to trust me. You might feel like you're one of the best players, but you're sitting on the side. And so I've always given my players that mentality, because, like all of these matter. And, a coach can walk up and see you playing catch and be like, okay, I could probably use this guy. Let me watch him for the rest of the game. Mm-hmm. But if you're just doing that stuff like haphazardly, you're not doing it with any focus,
they write you off.
That's
exactly right.
And you can be like one of the best guys on the field, like in game. But if you don't show it beforehand, you could get overlooked. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where, baseball is that type of sport where, coaches that know what they're looking at can see it almost right away.
That's right. Yeah, and I had a little tension on a team a few years ago. It was partly my fault, I guess, but I had a kid come in and he went, the first time I saw him in a tryout, he ran a 7.1560. He got a 40 arm grade, with the 50 being the average major league arm. And I went to a buddy of mine, a friend of mine from South Carolina. He played at Norfolk State, and we played summer ball together as one of my guys. And I went up and said, hey, give me that kid for a couple of years. He plays pro ball. And he goes, Jack, he batted 9th for us. He hit 230. I'm like, you think and I said, dude, I'm telling you, there's a lot there, because he like a gazelle. He just had long limbs. So by the time the fall is over, he's running a 6.7. By the time he leaves me, he's running a 6.5, and he ends up getting a 70 arm grade. So he develops, all of this talent for sure. But his biggest problem was at his wedding 2 years ago. I love him like a son, but he didn't grow up being the guy. So, he didn't have that carry himself like the guy, because so I'm trying to kind of develop the guy as I'm developing. Yeah, as I'm developing the player. But I had people tell me, you're nuts. That kid does not have. And then as he changed and got better, they're like, what did you see? And I'm like, fluidity, awkwardness, all these things at the same time. Love the kid. That's one of my favorite human beings I've ever been around. Yeah. And I said, I think there's something in there. And I just think the point of that story is there's a lot of coaches that don't have time for that. Right. If you're not that guy now, they're not in the development game. I get it.
Consider raw. Yeah,
I exactly. And the raw thing usually has a lot of code to it as well, which makes me mad. But yeah, the kid admitted this to me. And I'm close to this kid, right? I told the dad, I said, look, I think your kid, and he got 4 pre-draft workouts his sophomore year. He had a bunch of pro teams that started to show interest, but he hit a double his freshman year in the gap, and he ends up on second, really before you knew what happened. And there was a guy scouting, bird dog for a team, that's father played in the NFL at quarterback. And I knew his dad was. And he goes up to the father of my guy, gives a business card, and he said, "Hey, I'm really interested in seeing your kid play again." And so the next day, that kid comes up to me. He goes, "Coach, did you know that a scout left a card with my dad yesterday?" I said, Yeah. I talked to him on the phone last night for about 2 hours about you." He goes, "So when you told my dad you thought I had pro potential, you weren't just blowing smoke." I'm like, "Damn, son, do you think I was lying to you?" He
Right.
goes, "I never believed it. I thought you were just trying to recruit me." I'm like, "No, dude, I know what I'm looking at." Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I know what I was going to say. There was a tension a little bit on the team because I'm trying to build him up, and I see the potential. And I have this other kid who's pretty talented, and he comes up to me and he goes, "What is it you see in that kid?" I mean, what, coach? Why is like, I said, "You know what? This is a true story." I said, "We remember the other day when we were playing at fill in the blank school up in Maryland?" He goes, "Yeah. I said, "Well, there's a guy like 6'5" that played first base in the Phillies organization. He saw me at the fence because he remembered my days of doing player rep. Jackie, what's up, man?" I said, "Hey, man, how you been?" I go to the fence. He's 6'5". He's looking over my shoulder. He goes, "Whoa, stop the presses. What is that?" And I looked around and said, "Oh, yeah, you're going to like him." And so I asked the kid, I said, "What do you think he was doing?" The kid that's upset. He goes, "Probably throwing the outfield." I said, "Guess again." And he goes, "I don't know. He was running." I said, "Guess again." He goes, "I don't know, coach." I said, "He was walking by the dugout." He was walking by the dugout. "What's your point, coach?" I said, "The scout liked him walking
Yeah.
by the
Yeah. Yeah.
dugout."
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, "I bet he can run." I said, "What do you see?" I said, "Man, he can."
Assets.
He
Yeah.
goes, I said, "He's got arm strength." He goes, "Jack, I'm going to put him in." I said, "Son, he saw him." This is the same thing I saw. I just saw it raw 2 years earlier before it started to develop. I use the same term raw, but I saw him earlier. And the kid's like, "What are you trying?" I'm like, "Dude, if you know what you're looking at, you've seen it enough, you see
Yeah.
that kid in uniform." But as you were saying, I come out a lot and I see him and then I see half-ass throwing. I say, "Okay, you can write that." And I ask kids all the time, I'm like, "Guys, what's the first thing I see?" And they're like, "Kind of shoes we're wearing?" I mean, what? I was like, "No, body type." As soon as you get off the bus, if I see a body type, I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna follow that around. You can turn me on, you can turn me off,
Yeah.
depending on what I see."
The things you do next.
Right, but I'm going to look to see. I'm going to see a certain kind of way you carry yourself, how you wear the uniform. You're going to spark an interest. If I'm a
That's
college
right.
coach, if I know what I'm looking at, you're going to spark an interest, and you might play yourself in and out of that. And I said, "Guys, I've seen plenty of guys strike out 3 times. I still liked them."
Yeah.
Scouts are the same way. How
Yep.
you handle the strikeout might come into play, but if you look good in a uniform and you're having a bad day, all that comes into play. It's fine. It's fine. You don't have to hit 4 home runs on a game. If you do, that's sexy too. But
That's it. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
man, Carl, you're awesome. Appreciate you,
And
brother.
thank you, Coach. Thank you,
Anything you
Coach.
want to say in the closing? Please plug any of your stuff, the stuff that you're doing. We got to raise you some money, man, to keep this stuff going.
Man, thank you, man. So really no big plugs. Like I said, my organization is called Sliders Baseball, SLYDERZ Baseball. My email is carl@slidersbaseball.org. Um, I'm over there at RBA West, Virginia Seminoles, and man, I just appreciate the outlet. I appreciate the conversation, man, the connection that we formed.
Oh, we're gonna be doing more of this, brother. Believe me, we're gonna be
Man,
doing
I
more. Yeah,
appreciate it,
absolutely.
Coach.
Oh
I
yeah,
appreciate it,
absolutely.
Coach.
No, you're good. You're
And
good people.
hopefully, man, I thank you, man. Hopefully, I can send some kids your way.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm right in that sweet spot. Like I said, a lot of the kids that I coach from 8U, all of those guys are 16, 17 now. Sophomore, junior, senior. So, um, hopefully I can send some kids your way, man. I would love for them to come and get developed by you some more. So yeah, man. So, that's me. Anybody want to get in contact with me, that's my email, or they can reach out to you
Yeah.
and get in contact with me. I do a lot with youth sports. I'm a current my new team. I'm an assistant coach on the 16U, but I have my 11U squad now. So yeah, no big plugs, but I like people to kind of know what I'm doing and
Yeah.
can stay in contact with.
Well, we met through a really good guy, no doubt. And I met some other really good people in doing that. I had a good time with that. So I know we have a future doing some things to serve the kids and maybe make the whole game better too for it,
Yeah.
for no doubt.
Yeah.
God bless you,
Looking
my
forward to
friend.
it.
I really
Hey,
appreciate it.
thank you, Coach. God bless you, man. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody listen here. More to consider. Please like, please subscribe to the channel. Please leave comments. Let's keep getting great guests. So Carl and I will be doing this again soon. And hopefully this helps a lot of people that are working with youth baseball and youth sports in general. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like the show, subscribe and hit your notification button to get an update when we post another episode. See you soon.